Good evening and welcome to Conversations with the Candidates on Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with the Houston League of Women Voters, and with me tonight is our past president of the Houston League, Mary Jane Mudd. Mary Jane, welcome. Thank you for being on tonight.
Glad to be here.
On tonight's broadcast, we have a candidate for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 4, and that's Leslie Briones. We're going to be asking her some questions, a little bit to learn more about what she's doing, what your concerns with the district are, what you hope to accomplish should you be the successful candidate. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the precinct. It's been redrawn, and about Harris County in general. So I'd like to welcome you to Conversations with the Candidates, the League of Women Voters for Houston. And we'll start with this question.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you both, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to be here tonight and for everything that you do to educate voters in our community. It is so rare to have such a trusted source of information on all spectrums of the political scale. So thank you for what League of Women Voters does. So I'm Leslie Briones, and I am grateful to be the Democratic nominee for Harris County Commissioner Precinct 4. A little bit about myself. I am Latina. I am from South Texas. I am the daughter of teachers and the granddaughter of veterans. I am the proud mother of 3 little girls. I graduated from Harvard University and Yale Law School, and after college I went back to the border, back to South Texas, and I was a public school teacher. I taught 8th and 10th grade and went back up east, went to law school. I fell in love with Houston and moved here in 2007, and I worked at Vincent & Elkins. Then I was the general counsel and chief operating officer of a national nonprofit organization, the Laura and John Arnold Foundation, now Arnold Ventures, and helped scale that organization. And then I was one of your civil court judges here in Harris County for almost 3 years. And I resigned from the bench to run for county commissioner. And I'm very committed to flipping this seat so that together we can keep building a safer and more affordable Harris County for all of our families.
Wow, well, you've had quite a career so far, and now you wish to be commissioner. So why is Harris County Commissioner's Court important to you? What makes you truly interested in this role?
So the reason I loved being a judge, the reason I decided to put it all on the line, such a high risk, was because as commissioner, I can proactively be a part of the solution. As commissioner, we will work on the basics, the sidewalks, the potholes, the roads, improving our parks, improving the infrastructure in the county, working on public safety, public health, pretty much the whole gamut, and continuing to improve health outcomes in the county and improving mobility, improving every facet of life, and working not only with the county government, but working with the cities within the county, the state government, and the federal government to make sure we keep driving Harris County forward. And so the thought that I could be a part of this solution and a part of this change, and Precinct 4 is a new precinct. I know we're going to talk about that, but there's so much opportunity. We've made tremendous progress in Harris County, and I'm proud of what we've done, but there's still so much more to be done.
So being a part of the solution is what interests you, and just really putting yourself there to make that change. So like you just mentioned, the 2020 federal census, with the 2020 federal census, Harris County Commissioners' precincts were redrawn. So now we have a new district, excuse me. So what are the most pressing needs you see in this particular district?
Absolutely. First, let me describe the new Precinct 4, because there's many who, aren't exactly sure where the shifts are. So for those watching, every county is divided. We have 4 precincts. As we know, Harris County is bigger than 26 states. So each of our 4 precincts in Harris County have approximately 1.2 million people. Each precinct is about twice the size of an average congressional district. This new Precinct 4 is mainly West Harris County, but it includes various areas. So for example, we have the Beltway all the way out to Katy. We have Alief, Sharpstown, Gulfton, Asiatown, the Gandhi District. We have area close to the Galleria, Afton Oaks. We have River Oaks. We have near Memorial Park and Rice Military. We have Timber Grove, Lazy Brook. And it hooks all the way up to Waller. And there's a map right there that hopefully the viewers can see, or they can go to lesliebriones.com. We have an interactive map. So there's tremendous opportunity because it really is so varied. It is a majority-minority district. It is the most international of the districts. We have the Ellis Island of Harris County in Precinct 4, and it is approximately 40% Latino, 20% African American, about 14% Asian American, which is the largest segment of the 4 precincts, and then the rest white. And so I love the opportunity that we have to drive change across Precinct 4. And so it'll be very much an effort to work, again, on the basics, on the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the parks, making sure we're improving that and continuing to improve healthcare and public safety and addressing homelessness and all these different issues that are affecting our day-to-day lives. And to answer the second part, the biggest issues affecting Precinct 4, and we've knocked on over 100,000 doors in our campaign, listening to voters, talking with voters, have made tens of thousands of calls. So listening is of critical importance to me. And the main issues are 1, public safety, 2, economic opportunity, rebounding from the pandemic and addressing inflation, and 3, flood mitigation. And I know we're going to talk about and dive into these issues later in the segment. And taking a step back, the kind of macro principle that is people want to know what their county government is doing for them. Many of the doors we've knocked, they're unaware of what a county commissioner is, what they do, and so it's an opportunity. The first thing, when God willing we flip the seat in a few days, is to go around the precinct in a very purposeful, committed way and listening to my constituents to hear their ideas on what is the most pressing. Because to me, government's just part of the picture. We're all in this together, and it really is working with the neighborhoods, with the homeowners associations, super neighborhood councils, the churches, the schools, and just different segments of the community. So I am deeply committed to doing that when I'm the next commissioner.
Well, you just mentioned some issues, and clearly those are so critical. Flooding, there is no question, but also public health has had a tremendous impact on Harris County, especially with COVID and so much that has happened in the past couple of years. So how do you feel, and you do have some very strong goals, how do you feel you will work with the county judge and the other commissioners to make some of these things happen, to do good for the community?
First of all, I'm committed to collaborating. I will go into healthcare in just a second, but what I am so focused on right now is we've been seeing dysfunction in our county government. The 2 Republican commissioners, one of whom is my opponent, Jack Cagle, Commissioner Cagle, failed to show up to 6 commissioners' court meetings. And now this week, we have learned that our county is stuck and shackled to this no new revenue rate budget, which, to go to we can talk about all of the ramifications. But generally, I will always be committed to working across the aisles to find solutions, to find compromise, and to deliver results. So this process started in June to work on the budget. June. We're at the end of October, and a solution was never reached because people were putting political stunts over actual results. And when I was a judge, I wore a black robe to my court. Not a blue robe, not a red robe. Everybody who walked into my courtroom, I was committed to doing the absolute best job in administering justice to everybody, listening to everyone, upholding everyone's rights. And I'm an adjunct professor at U of H Law Center. I'm the daughter of teachers, so I think teaching's in my blood. But when I'm teaching my law students at U of H, I teach all of them. I don't teach some of them. So that is what I will take to Commissioner's Court, this judicial temperament, this commitment to serving everybody, both those who vote for me and those who don't vote for me. And it'll be interesting to see how the election plays out and the future. I mean, the Commissioner's Court can go in many different directions, but regardless of how the numbers play out in terms of D versus R, I will work with everybody and I will play that role of mediator and negotiator because as a lawyer, that is what I do. I love negotiating. It's one of my favorite things to do. But we need that, right? People are tired of dysfunction and games and stunts and rhetoric. They want a government that works. And when your home floods, when you're the victim of crime, it doesn't matter if you voted Democrat or Republican. So to go specifically to health, the reality we are going to live with, thanks to the political games and the Republicans not showing up to vote on the tax rate, we will have a cut to the hospital district of approximately $150 million. To Harris Health, of approximately $45 million. And we will live with these cuts, not just into this fiscal year, but based on the revenue caps under state law, we will be living and dying with the ramifications for years to come. So what will I do within my purview as commissioner? Number one, we need to expand Medicaid. That is a state level decision that needs to be made, but I will put all my force behind and the county's advocacy and lobbying resources to make sure we are pressuring our state government to expand Medicaid so that we have that funding coming into Harris County. That is of paramount importance, and I will not stop fighting until that happens. Two, I love and I'm so proud that we live in Houston and we have world-class medical care. My father, he survived, praise God, but we spent a lot of time at Methodist, and I loved seeing and hearing all of the languages, for example. I mean, we have literally world-class medical care. People come from across the world to access this phenomenal care. In this very same county that we have doctor deserts, healthcare deserts, many of them are in Precinct 4, for instance. I think it is unacceptable and unconscionable that we have life expectancies that vary by up to 20 years, depending on your zip code. That is unacceptable. So one thing, for example, that I want to do is work very collaboratively and purposefully with the Texas Medical Center to see how much more community work and involvement they can do. I've really loved watching what, for example, Precinct 2, Commissioner Adrian Garcia has done in partnership with the Baylor College of Medicine. They have these smart pods, basically mobile health community clinics that go into these parts that have these medical care deserts. So I would like to explore that as well. And then women's reproductive health. First, let me start with maternal mortality. As it's unacceptable that Harris County leads the nation, leads all metropolitan areas in terms of the number of maternal deaths. Here in Harris County, again, the same place where we have world-class medical care, we need to address that in a very purposeful way in collaboration with the state and federal government. And relatedly, women's reproductive health. We cannot change the draconian state law, and I cannot change the U.S. Supreme Court and its decisions. But what we can do as commissioners and with the Commissioner's Court is increase funding for free and low-cost, accessible birth control. We can continue increasing the amount of sex education we give. So we need to work and see how we can mitigate these draconian laws that don't even allow exceptions for rape and incest. And again, as the mother of 3 young girls, the fact that they're growing up with fewer rights than their grandmothers is just staggering, to put it lightly. And so as commissioner, healthcare is of paramount importance, and that's something I very much want to work on.
Before we continue the show, I do want to let everybody know that we did reach out to all the candidates for the contest, for the race, and we do this for every conversation with the candidate we have. And so we did not hear back from Commissioner Cagle. to appear on the show, but we did reach out to him, so we like to give every candidate the opportunity to appear, and so we want to thank you for
Yes.
coming.
I appreciate
Absolutely.
the opportunity.
It's important to share that. Crime. It's on everybody's minds. A lot of people are concerned about it. I want to make sure I get this right. Even though Houston's crime is about in the middle of the nation's largest cities, murders in the city are going up. But still, we're remaining flat in the county. Either way, people are concerned about crime. So as county commissioner, what will you do to help confront an issue that's on everyone's minds?
Yes, and this is the number one issue we've heard with all of the voters we've spoken with. Well, first of all, I just wanted to start by saying I've been the victim of crime several times, starting when I was a child. Our home was broken into when I was home, actually twice as a child, and you never forget that fear. And incidents have continued throughout my adult life. And so as someone who's been the victim multiple times and as a mother of 3 young daughters, I take this very seriously. And I believe we can do much better in terms of keeping everybody safe and protecting everyone's constitutional rights. It's a both and in my book. So for example, first order of business, we have 400 open, approved, funded positions at the sheriff's office. We can't fill them because we are not paying competitive enough wages, and we're losing talent to surrounding areas and other urban centers. And so folks may have been hearing, some of this Republican grandstanding, we need 1,000 more boots on the ground. Maybe in the future, but as a former COO of a multi-billion-dollar organization, you fill positions that are open first, and you analyze why they're not filled. In this case, because we're not paying competitive wages, you get that done. We need to fill those positions. We need to make sure that we are paying the men and women who are sacrificing and risking their lives for all of us what they are due. So for example, Commissioner Cagle voted against a pay raise in February of 2022. I will support pay raises for law enforcement officers. And I'm going to talk about some budget ramifications and how we're going to live with the consequences of people playing hooky, but we'll get to that in a second. Microzones. I very much am interested to seeing how we can continue using a microzone, how we can use a surgical approach to addressing crime, because it's had quite positive results in decreasing violent crime in Dallas, for instance. We know where the hot spots are, and so let's be strategic how we're addressing those areas where there's the most violent crime. Community policing, violence prevention is something I care about. As a judge, I was a civil court judge, not a criminal court judge, but I inherited a huge backlog, and I was able to clear it, again, using the COO meets judge meets lawyer approach, right, to better serve the parties in my court. We need to clear the criminal court backlog, so I have very much agreed with the funding Commissioner's Court has given to have associate visiting judges, basically substitute teacher judges, so that we can clear that backlog more quickly, because we had Harvey, the pandemic. We just need to clear that backlog. And so how can we add additional dockets, maybe have a auxiliary kind of ancillary location to get through those cases, add weekend dockets. We need to move those cases. Also, we in Harris County, our jail should not be the biggest mental health facility. So I feel very passionately about wanting to scale the holistic assistance response team, which essentially, if it's a mental health, addiction, homelessness related incident, we have someone specialized in mental health addressing that so that we can leverage our law enforcement officers for the more violent crimes. Let's use resources strategically. Again, as a victim of crime, I feel very passionately about making sure we have a crime victims assistance office, so working in collaboration, trying to get some state funding in. Viper, we just started this violent persons task force. There's about 50,000 active warrants for violent persons. In Harris County, we just started Viper, which you would have thought we would have had it a long time ago. And again, my opponent's been there 11 years. But in any case, we now have it. So we need to make sure those people who have an active warrant for violent crime, we locate them. Because that is important, because a small segment of people are responsible for a disproportionate amount of crime. So that's a high leverage play. And then, of course, we need to have an honest conversation about gun safety, because that is a huge driver. But in the meantime, again, I can't change state law, but we can have more gun buyback programs, gun safety law programs, gun safety awareness programs, and just work on all sides. But again, because the two Republicans failed to show up, the proposed budget would have increased law enforcement funding $100 million under the Democrats. And for the record, anyone watching, facts, facts, facts. Law enforcement funding has gone up every single year, has not been cut. But now, actually, ironically, the Republicans have defunded and reduced funding for law enforcement. And that is going to, for example, the sheriff had to cancel his new cadet class. The pay raise that was going to be 8.25% for law enforcement is now cut to 4%. So we're having all these cuts. I think we need to be investing in law enforcement, but again, we're going to have to live within the ramifications and be creative about how we're able to reallocate funding to make sure we drive the outcomes that our community deserves.
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much. We want to thank you for coming out. As I mentioned, we did extend a invitation to Jack Cagle as well. But, you know, this is a way that we can be better informed voters when candidates will come in and answer questions about issues that are facing them in the elections. And so it's very important, and this is one of the things that the League of Women Voters does. Every year, one of the other things we do that we're very proud of is our voters guide. Now, you may be familiar with this, and
Absolutely.
you know, as a candidate, you received questions and were given the opportunity to write back, and so that anybody can come up for whatever position. And there was a lot on the ballot, as people have said.
Yes, the long ballot.
You already voted. I'm still waiting.
Monday, Halloween is when I'm voting.
And then, you know, everybody gets a chance to answer so that people can see where they stand. And it is about, in this democratic republic we live in, it is about being an educated voter. It's one of our rights and responsibilities as American citizens. And so the guide is where you can see responses that candidates have, and we thank you for the time that you had in replying. The guides are available in paper format, and I remember to bring one this time. They're available in paper format, and you can pick them up in various places, but they're also available at two places online. So you can go to lwvhouston.org. You can download a copy, but there's also you can also get it through vote411.org.
Yeah, vote411.org offers you a digital ballot that's tailored to your needs. And you know, I was just doing my research on it yesterday. It is so helpful just to go all the way down and see, you know, all sides of the ballot.
Extremely. I used to use it and still do all the time.
Yeah.
And do I have time for a very brief closing remarks?
Sure.
Well, I just, again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for what League of Women Voters does. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I'm here. And again, that speaks volumes as we see the empty chair here. I will always show up because it's important to me that we're finding solutions for the people we serve. I deeply and actually believe that the government is for us, like we the people. And I am asking for our viewers vote and know that whether or not you ultimately vote for me, I will serve you with everything I am and everything I have. And I will take that experience from the classroom, from the courtroom, from the boardroom to get to work for all Harris County families to build a safer and more affordable Harris County. And the ballot is extremely long. I will be towards the very bottom. So please persist. Go down that ballot. Go start to finish, because it really is these local races that affect your day, whether or not your kid has a sidewalk for them to walk on the way to school. And so I am so thankful for the opportunity to be here. And I am please asking for your vote, Leslie Briones. And if you want to learn more of any of my positions, or you want to get involved with our campaign, as I mentioned, we're knocking on doors, calling voters every day, all day, please visit lesliebriones.com. And just thank you again for your leadership.
Thank you very
for
much.
being here.
Thank you.
One quick question.
Sure.
You said you're from South Texas. What part of South
Sí,
Texas?
soy de Laredo. I'm from Laredo, Texas.
Okay.
Sí.
So way down there.
Mexicana, americana. Sí, de la
Very
frontera.
good.
I'm from Laredo, Texas. Yes.
So Leslie Briones, thank you very much for being with us on Conversations with the Candidates. We wish you the best of luck. We wish all the candidates the best of luck in the campaign. And so thank you again. Stick around, folks, because in just a few minutes we're going to be talking with candidates for U.S. House District 38. That's coming up in just a few minutes, but we've got some information we'd like to share with you about voter ID requirements. Remember, you have to have a voter photograph ID when you go down to vote.
Yeah.
And also some important dates to be aware of. The last day, especially for mailing in, is the 28th, which is tomorrow. So if you're planning on voting in,
Time flies.
yeah, if you're planning on mailing in your ballot, you need to get that in planned out by tomorrow. So don't forget about that. So we'll see you in just a few minutes. If you're just now joining us, I want to thank you for joining in. This is Conversations with the Candidates at Houston Media Source TV. I'm Gene Preuss with the Houston League of Women Voters. And with me tonight, our guest host is Mary Jane Mudd, who is immediate past president of the Houston League. Thank you for being on tonight. Tonight, we, in the second half, we're going to be talking with two candidates for U.S. District 38. This is a new district that was created as a result of the 2020 election. And with us, we have Duncan Klusman.
Yes, sir.
And Joel Dejean. It's French. I took French in high school. I should be able to say that, but
yeah, it's French from Haiti.
Well, we want to thank you both for coming out, and we do want to mention to everybody, remind everybody that at the League of Women Voters, we're a nonpartisan organization, and we invite all candidates to be on the show with us who are running for a particular race. And so we'd also reached out to Wesley Hunt's campaign, but we did not get a response back. And so had they responded back, if they would have been able to make it, we would have certainly made a seat for them as well. And we thank you two for showing up. So we're going to ask you some questions to learn a little bit more about you and the district and what you hope to accomplish should you be elected to Congress. So welcome to Conversations with the Candidates, both of you. And Duncan, we'll start with you, and we're going to give you each a little bit of time to do this. So in about 3 or 4 minutes, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. The League of Women Voters, you do a great job of getting information out to the electorate, and that's so important in our society today. So thank you very much for allowing Joel and I to be here and be part of this today. So I grew up in Brenham, Texas. I'm a native Texan. Grew up in Brenham, kind of family there for generations, moved to Huntsville in high school and finished out my schooling in Huntsville, Texas, and then went off to stayed at Sam Houston for a couple years, played tennis, and then went to the University of Texas and graduated with a double major in international business and finance. Found my way into the classroom and started teaching and had a 28-year career in public education. My last is 11 as superintendent of schools in Spring Branch ISD, and love that experience and love leading a large organization, 4,500 employees, 35,000 students, a $250 million annual budget. And during that time, because Spring Branch was built mainly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we started replacing schools that were built pre-air conditioning days and oversaw a $597 million bond program, replaced many of the elementary schools within the system, and just enjoyed leading that effort. And so lots of background in leading large organizations, being very involved in the community. I was on the Jersey Village City Council and the president of their Crime Control and Prevention District for many years. Very involved in our church, Founder United Methodist Church, and also in youth sports within the Jersey Village area, and have just loved being part of the community, 20 plus years working and living in the community in District 38.
Joel, what about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Okay, thanks for having me. And I am an electrical engineer who was a 10-year-old immigrant from Haiti. In 1969, got to see Neil Armstrong take that giant leap for mankind. And that inspired me to study science. And I went to the State University of New York at Stony Brook. And in 1980, I was recruited by Texas Instruments to come work at their Dallas plant. They had a huge defense electronics group. So I got to work on infrared detection and targeting systems, mainly for Air Force programs, U.S., Australian, Republic of Korea. And I got to travel around the world visiting these various air bases. And during my travels, I ran into the Lyndon LaRouche Fusion Energy Foundation, which was the main organization in the 80s promoting nuclear power and thermonuclear fusion research. So I joined his presidential campaign in the late 80s, and I've been promoting fusion energy, nuclear power, the space program, and going after the voodoo science of man-made climate change. So that's what brought me into politics. I have run for Congress back in the 90s, but with this new district, I decided to jump in and present these ideas to the greater public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. As you said, this is a new district. It was created as a result of the 2020 federal census. And your first session will be in the 118th Congress. So I'll start with Duncan. What made you decide to run for this seat? And do you have any preferences for committee appointments?
Yeah, so when I looked at the redrawing of this, I just felt there was something inherently wrong where the career politicians in Austin decided to draw a seat to gift to someone, to gift to Wesley Hunt. I feel like gerrymandering is kind of killing our democracy the way we do it. And I looked at that and said, there's just something inherently wrong about that. And with my extensive involvement within the community, I said, if anyone can hold his feet to the fire and if anyone can hold him accountable and give the voters a choice in November, that would be me. And so I decided to put my name in for the race. I won the Democratic nomination through the runoff process. And now I'm a candidate in the general election that's going on now in early voting, and then on November 8th for the general election day. And just felt like really, we need individuals to be able to have a choice in November, and I wanted to provide that choice and felt like with my experience I could provide that. What type of committee assignment? So obviously my education background, I want to serve on education and have an influence there. Also very interested in foreign affairs. I've been able to travel the world, see other cultures, understand how important America's position in the world is and how we need to maintain that, and would want to be able to have some influence on that through a foreign affairs type committee assignment.
Thank you. Joel, what about you?
Well, again, this is an open district, so there's no incumbent. So I wanted to run as an independent because if you look at foreign policy, when it comes to things like the war in Ukraine, there is virtually no difference between the Republican and Democratic parties when it comes to supporting war. Now, most Democrats supported the war in Iraq, supported the war in Afghanistan, supported NATO's attack on Libya. So I wanted to present an independent voice for Texas, not just in the District 38, but as a leader in the Congress and the committees I would want to be part of, besides being a member of the Fusion Energy Caucus, which there is a Fusion Caucus in the current Congress, but I would want to be on defense, energy, and intelligence, because for too long we've had fake intelligence get into useless wars, and this energy policy being pushed by Biden and accepted by the Republicans, the decarbonizing, the attack on fossil fuels. I want to reverse that policy. I have been endorsed by Dr. Neil Frank, who was a weatherman here for over 20 years. And he endorsed me because of my knowledge and attack on this global warming fraud. So I would want to be in those committees dealing with energy.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Joel, I'm going to start back with you again. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, this is a new district, and you mentioned this as well. So, what do you see as the most pressing needs and issues you'll face representing the area? And also, how are you going to work with other members of the Texas delegation to face these challenges in Washington, D.C.?
Well, the most immediate pressing challenge, which is true for the 38th district as well as every district in Texas and every district across the nation, is the threat that we are sleepwalking, stumbling into thermonuclear war. So I would present an alternative to citizens in the district, citizens in Texas and across the nation, to say no to NATO. NATO has been the aggressor for the last 32 years. We have to get out of NATO, stop this war in Ukraine. We must have peace negotiations. And this district is known as the energy corridor. We can't be turning our back on fossil fuels. So I would continue to support fossil fuel development, scrap the renewables like windmills and solar and go with small modular nuclear power and promote research for space and fusion research.
Okay, Duncan, the same question to you. What are the most pressing needs for the new district, and how will you work with the other members of the Texas delegation in D.C. to solve some of these issues?
Thank you for that question. So, having lived and worked, raised our family in this district for 20 plus years, these are the issues that I hear as I'm out and about in the district and talking to individuals. Number one, school safety. I think moms and dads and families today are very concerned about school safety. And really in the state, we've really done nothing to address these issues since Santa Fe and since Uvalde. Since Santa Fe, we've gone the wrong direction in addressing these issues by making it easier and easier to have guns in our society. And so I think there's smart legislation that can be done. We also need to focus on mental health around the whole issue of taking care of kids and making sure they have the right needs taken care of. In our state, 1.7 million Texans could qualify for Medicaid today if we would allow them to do that. Can you imagine the number of individuals in public schools who would get some level of mental health care and they're not getting today if we would put those 1.7 million Texans on Medicaid that we've been able to for 7, 8, 9 years, and we refuse the federal dollars to do that. Also, restoring women's rights, I think, is just critical. That is such a disastrous decision at the Supreme Court to say that if a word essentially is not in the Constitution, it's left to the states to decide. So now marriage is not in the Constitution, education is not in the Constitution. And so I had someone say to me, well, don't you just trust states' rights to make these right decisions? Don't you just trust them to make the right decision? I said, do we remember George Wallace at the schoolhouse door? There are times where states do not make the right decision. And our Constitution, that's the beauty of our Constitution, is supposed to protect each of us. And so I think restoring women's rights. Inflation is a critical issue that's affecting everyone in our country and in this district, and we need to focus on inflation. Flooding, we lived in Jersey Village for many years, and I can remember during Alicia, it coming within, or Allison, I think, came within an inch of going in our house. We had no flood insurance, a young family, one-story home, just an awful feeling, and then to know the feeling, to understand the feelings of all those individuals who did flood multiple times. We've got to address flooding, and we need to get ahead of flooding versus just trying to deal with it once it happens. We need to get ahead of it so it doesn't happen. And then finally, crime. We need to do things and we need to work together to reduce crime. Houston has the fewest officers per citizens, I think, of any major metropolitan area. And we've got to be able to find a way to infuse dollars into local communities so that they can add and bring on more individuals into their police force so that we have more officers on the streets.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to take one of the last questions. Now, you just mentioned crime, but you might want to reiterate what we're going to focus on here now is the issues of immigration and crime. It's on the tips of the tongues throughout the nation. Certainly, it's a concern in Houston and Harris County. And so, if you are in this role, what role will you take to address these concerns? Now, again, I know you just talked a bit about crime, but you can reiterate. And so, again, we're talking immigration and crime. I'll start with Joel.
Well, being an immigrant, my family moved to New York when I was 6 in 1965. And I realized that the root of the immigration problem is the lack of development in countries like Haiti and sanctions imposed on countries like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. So my view is that the United States has to go back to what is in the Constitution, which is to promote the general welfare. And what would benefit the United States and to help develop other countries is that the United States, the U.S., must go back to a Glass-Steagall banking separation. Right now, trillions of dollars have been pumped out by the Federal Reserve over the last 14, almost 15 years to bail out J.P. Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, the banks on Wall Street and London. I would cut that off, make sure that credit is available through a new national bank modeled on what Alexander Hamilton did with the first national bank, so that credit is available for things like infrastructure, real infrastructure, water projects, the the water projects, including tunnels to take water into the Galveston Bay if we have another storm like Harvey, and to develop the Artemis program as a real Apollo Moon Mars mission. And that would give youth in this country something to work for. Because I remember when I was 10 and I looked at the Apollo project, I didn't know all the details. I didn't even know what color Neil Armstrong was. But that inspired me. We need to inspire the youth for a future in space instead of being cannon fodder for NATO in various wars around the world. And if we have a war with Russia and China, there won't be anybody around to worry about women's rights or anybody else's rights.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you a question about.
Were you able to comment on immigration?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is a really important issue that's received obviously a lot of attention over the last really decade. But we have an immigration issue because Congress has failed to act since 1984. They've tried to take immigration reform, got close during the George W. Bush years, couldn't get it through in a bipartisan way, and every president in the future, present and in the future, is going to have an immigration issue if Congress continues to refuse to act. And so we need a comprehensive immigration reform that allows a path to citizenship for individuals who are here, who are working hard, who are paying taxes, who are great citizens, and DACA students, many that I worked with in Spring Branch, who are just incredible kids, incredible families that really need that path. Then we also need a work program like we had in the 60s and 70s that we had in the past that worked, where individuals come here. In fact, one of the issues for the inflationary situation, where inflation is not a one-item issue. It's not gasoline is high, so we have inflation. We've had higher gas prices, higher oil prices than we have right now when inflation was very low. It's multiple issues. And one is the whole issue around employment. And so because we've lacked to have any comprehensive immigration reform, we now have an employment issue that's driving up costs. And so I would want to really work in a bipartisan way to get comprehensive immigration reform in. And on the side of crime, again, I think we need, and we've done this before at a federal level, is provide resources at the local level to add officers on the streets. And particularly in Houston, where we have a revenue cap, we now have the situation at the county where they have a budget that can't increase in inflationary times, and so they can't put officers on the streets that they need to. We have over 400 vacancies within the sheriff's department because we can't raise the budget to pay those individuals the wage. In fact, I saw many of those individuals at the time leave the sheriff's department and come to the school district police department because of pay. And so, I think there are things we can do from a federal level to provide those resources to the local level to make sure that we get more officers on the street to really address the issue of crime.
Thank you.
All right, so I've got a question, but I'm going to ask for a quick response about a couple of minutes each, and it's the biggest question of them all. So, talking about the economy, arguably we're in a recession. And since the U.S. House has the primary budget fiduciary responsibility in our government, what position will you take regarding the economy and the nation's infrastructure? Joel, we'll start with you.
Well, basically 4 steps that need to be taken. First, like I said before, we must reestablish Franklin Roosevelt's Glass-Steagall Act. That was taken down in 1999, and we've had one bubble after another. Step 2, we have to take control of the Federal Reserve. Ben Bernanke was just awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for being the most incompetent Federal Reserve chairman, and he's had a lot of company. The Federal Reserve has pumped trillions of dollars, not into the real economy, but into speculation, and that's why we have hyperinflation. Number 3, long-term low-interest credit must flow into these real infrastructure, high-speed rail, water projects, and the development of inner cities. And if we have to revive the Civilian Conservation Corps, that would bring down the crime more than anything else. And number 4, we have to have a great science project like we had with Kennedy and the Apollo project. This time we can combine controlled thermonuclear fusion with a moon Mars mission, and that would revive the economy more than anything else. But these 4 steps have to be taken in combination.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, and I would love Congress to actually pass a true budget. So Congress has been acting and operating for many years without going through a regular budget cycle and actually approving a budget. And so leading a school district for 11 years and a $250 million budget, it's very important to go through a process to analyze how you're spending and the best way and most efficient way to spend, an effective way to spend. And we really haven't been doing that. We've been doing continuing resolutions and just continue to add. And then we have this conversation every quarter or every 6 months about, are we going to pass to raise then the debt ceiling? It's not the way to run things long term. It's not the way that an organization or a company would run. And I think we need to run our country in the best way we can. I think we need to pass an actual budget. On the inflationary side, I think there's multiple, I'm very concerned about this because I think there's multiple factors coming together to create our inflationary issue we have today that could trigger long-term inflation if we don't address this and realize it's more than the supply chains from the pandemic. We seem to be, that's going to be getting our whole focus, supply chain issues from the pandemic. If we solve that, we'll be fine. In fact, I feel like the Fed overanalyzed that piece of it. But I think if you go back, there's 3 or 4 decisions. By the way, government's kind of really does this often where it makes individual decisions that aren't tied together, that then tie together to create a bad situation. It can happen in governmental kind of policy making, and I think that's happened. For instance, the protectionist policies of the Trump administration, we knew would raise prices. What we didn't anticipate is that rise in price would occur right when we then had a pandemic, where we then had a total disruption in the supply chain. So you take protectionist policies that automatically raise prices. And by the way, some of those decisions may be good to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but we just need to acknowledge that it will raise prices. I've seen that in things I purchased myself. We wanted to put an aluminum fence in. The guy told me, hey, you're paying 30% more this year. I said, why? He said, because we put tariffs on the aluminum coming in. The American manufacturers can't up their production fast enough. They have to build more factories. And so as a result, you're paying 30% more. And then we have the supply chain issues that are going to have occurred and will work themselves out, but we need to work with our chairman, our CEOs of companies to work those supply chain issues out. We have the whole employment side with immigration that's occurred. And then we had the Fed that actually took away or kind of reduced their quantitative easing too late. I think the Fed really thought it was a supply chain issue and that in the summer we'd see inflation go down, and now we're not seeing inflation go down. So I think we have to work together to work on all those issues. And I think we have to align our fiscal policy with our monetary policy to make sure we're aggressively addressing inflation.
Very good. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both so much for coming out. And once again, I want to remind the viewers, the League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. And so we offer conversations with the candidates in conjunction with Houston Media Source TV here. And we ask any candidate, we contact all the campaigns from the listings on the Secretary of State's website. Would you be interested in coming out and presenting your views on the show? Likewise, we also ask all candidates on the ballot for several questions to address and to answer in our voter's guide. You're probably very familiar with that. And again, not all candidates can do that. Now, coming here can be a time constraint, right? Because sometimes I think at the last minute we get notice, hey, you got a spot open, and so we reach out, and we certainly understand that. But we hope that either between the voter's guide or conversations with the candidate, we're helping to make Houston voters a bit more educated about their options. And so, gentlemen, I want to thank you for participating in this, and I wish you both the best of luck in the campaign. Unfortunately, despite the great answers, only one person will be successful. But I want to thank you for the great answers you gave.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to mention, back to the voter's guide, that we don't edit anything that's given to us. When information is sent to us, we take it just as it is. We don't edit anything. We want this to be a nonpartisan, fair guide where you can get your information. We also have vote411.org. That offers you a digital ballot, so you can go on, you put in your address, and bam, you see right away what your ballot is going to be about, and you see information on candidates of both parties. Again, not edited. So remember, you will have that opportunity to do your research as well. And I want to thank the two gentlemen for being here this evening. I think it's been a very good conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So one other question that I wanted to ask a follow-up, and I've got just about a minute left. And I know you talked about school safety, and that's not something that you had a chance to mention. So I wanted to ask you, in about the minute or so that we've got left, what are your thoughts on school safety? Because gun control is an issue that is coming up in the news, and Congress hasn't done anything since the 1980s as well on gun control, but they're expecting some changes. So how would you address that if you're elected?
You're talking to me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, the first thing, we cannot have gun control in this country. We are pouring weapons, billions of dollars of weapons, into the black market of Ukraine. The U.S. has been involved in one war after another. Ever since we started bombing Serbia, we had Columbine. And I spoke to a congresswoman in a town hall meeting one day before the Uvalde. So the problem with the school safety is that the U.S. has been militarized, where we are promoting gun first-person shooter video games. That has to be addressed. So yeah, we have to have gun control. We have to start with our arming nations like Ukraine, pumping money into Iraq, Afghanistan, these useless wars that give the bad example to our youth, and that's why we've had these rash of killings, not just guns.
Thank you very much. So again, thank you both for responding and for being on the show tonight. Mary Jane, thank you for being the guest host. Great job, everybody. And join us again. Hopefully, we'll get our candidates for county judge next week. Stay tuned, and we're still making out arrangements for that. For the League of Women Voters of Houston, I'm Gene Preuss. Thank you for joining us for Conversations with the Candidates on Houston Media Source TV. Have a good night.